Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the next in the series of GH26 talks. This one is by Dave Bonner, and Dave's been keeping bees since 2005. He's a master beekeeper. He's a former bee inspector and now focuses on keeping his colonies well for honey production and supporting beekeepers in his local area. And tonight's talk is about making nucs for different purposes, and it's going to be really interesting and essential viewing. So over to you, Dave.
Right, thank you, Diane. Still people arriving. Right, thank you for coming along this evening. There's quite a crowd of you. Going to talk about nucs. The focus is very much on the requirements of the general husbandry assessment with respect to nucs. So I'm using that as to provide the focus. That said, there'll be a fair range of things. I don't know how many of you actually use nuc boxes. I believe that as beekeepers we don't use them enough, and as beekeepers we probably don't have enough nuc boxes available in our sheds to use through the season. I'm just going to share a screen. Right. So I just want to be able to see the whites of your eyes on this screen here, so I can. So what I want to come back here. Right, that's better. Okay. Makes me feel I'm talking to a room of people as opposed to just the nutter on the bus talking alone in the study. Right. So we're going to talk about the nucleus hive this evening. Before I get into that, a couple of general comments. One is we'll take questions at the end. So if you have questions on the way through, just put them onto the chat. If there are any technological issues or technical issues, then flag them up to Diane, please, so we can get them resolved as soon as we can. Hopefully we'll be okay. So what are the general comments, right? The general husbandry assessment is a BBKA assessment. So like all the BBKA assessments and exams we do, we've got a much better chance of passing them if we do things in the BBKA preferred way. Now, in beekeeping, there are many ways of doing things right. Some people have a preference. The literature from the BBKA definitely shows a preference in some areas. So let's latch onto that and make life simple for ourselves when we're doing an assessment or a written module, right? That said, for the general husbandry, the assessors, including me, when we're looking at what candidates are doing, if it will work, if what they're doing will work against the question they've been asked, with no risk to the queen or the colony, then it should be okay. You should get the pass marks. So, but keep things simple. Try to do things in the BBK preferred way, but also we're looking to see if things will work. All right. In putting together this talk this evening, my reference books have been the General Husbandry special issue, which is essential reading for anybody who's going to do the general husbandry, and also for many years what's been regarded as kind of within the BBKA as a de facto reference book, and that is Hooper, which is a guide to bees and honey. If you use those two as part of high up in your priority list for your reference material across the whole assessment and the assessment syllabus, then you will not go far wrong. Right. So what does the general husbandry syllabus say with respect to nucs? Right. As a requirement to enter, you need to have a queen-right nucleus colony of honeybees suitable for developing into a colony. Right, so what that looks like is a nuc box which is getting pretty full, kind of 3, 4, maybe 5 seams of bees, 2 or 3 seams of brood. It isn't something which has just been put together the day before with a couple of seams of bees, a frame of brood, and maybe a queen cell. So it's kind of suitable for developing into a colony. So that's a requirement, right? Section 1.4 of the syllabus says preparation of a nucleus colony for the purpose of swarm control, sale, increase or queen mating as advised by the assessors. So the assessors will be looking at a candidate, will have been looking at the hives, and will ask the candidate to make up a nuke box, a nuke colony, and will select whether it's for swarm control, sale, increase, queen mating. So it'll be one of those four, and you'll be expected to go and do that. Right? So that's section 1.4. Section 3.9, the procedures used to prepare a nucleus colony and discuss the many uses for a nucleus colony. So as part of the general discussion and the questions, you'll be asked about nukes, how you use them, and the principles behind preparing a nuke, right? So it's just the general purpose things of what you would do and what a nuke would look like. So that's 3.9. And then in 3.14, there are how colonies are prepared for winter and the timing of carrying out these arrangements. Now this says colonies, but behind that we've got to include in that nuke boxes, because if you've got nukes, you've got to prepare them for the winter. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So in terms of nucleus boxes and general husbandry, this is pretty focused. There isn't a lot on there, or there doesn't seem to be a lot on there from those three items. But beware, and this is from my experience as an assessor, thinking about candidates, right? Listen to what the assessor has said. When you're doing your assessment, whether it be this year or next year, right? Listen to what the assessor has said and has asked of you, right? Repeat what you have heard back to the assessor. And sometimes we hear what we want to hear, which isn't necessarily what has been asked. So it's really important that you listen to what the assessor has said and you repeat back what they've said, so you can then agree that what's been said and what you've heard and what you understand are the same. Right? Then you're 50% of the way there. Right? So that's pretty important. Section 1.2 of the syllabus says the procedures for creating an artificial swarm other than using a nucleus. Right? And I've had assessments where the candidate's been asked to do swarm control on a hive other than using a nucleus, and all they've heard is swarm control, and they've gone straight off and used a nuke box to do the swarm control. So that's just an example of the dangers we can get into unless you listen, repeat what you've heard back, and then agree with the assessor that you have common understanding. Really is important. Right? My advice from having done these assessments is that in preparing for it and on the day, always keep things simple. Don't go into trying to do sophisticated and complex manipulations which you've read about or you've heard on the internet or you've seen. Just keep it simple, right? All right? Practice, practice, practice. Before the day, practice everything you have, because then on the day, you will be able to practice it smoothly and efficiently. As an assessor, it is very, very clear to me when a candidate has practiced something, because they're able to go and get the equipment, they're able to decide what they need to do, they're able to position it, and then they go through the manipulation almost from memory muscle, or muscle memory, I should say. Is that right around? Yeah. Right. Whereas somebody who has read about it thinks they know the theory but has never practiced it, it can all go horribly wrong very quickly. So keep it simple, practice, 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 and that way around it'll be You'll be very smooth and efficient, and it will shine through whenever you're doing an assessment. And that goes for all the assessments, whether it be the basic, the honeybee health, the general husbandry, or the advanced, or even the microscopy. It just shines through, right? Now, one of the bits of the syllabus is asking about the uses of a nucleus. And some of us could probably rattle off 2, 3, 4. So I put my list together earlier on, and it's section 3.9, and it's quite a lengthy list. How can you use a nucleus? You can sell it. You can use it to increase the colonies you have. You can make it up for mating new queens. You can use it for swarm control by removing the queen from a swarming colony. You can use it to introduce a new queen into a small nuke, and that's especially useful when you're requeening an aggressive colony. You can house a small swarm in it. A prime swarm would be too big, but a smaller swarm would be great. If you've got a spare queen, you've requeened a colony, for example, in swarm control, you've removed a queen, and the colony is then successfully requeened, you've got a spare queen. You can just keep it in the nuke and store her there. You never know when you or one of your friends may need one. I use them for maintaining old breeder queens, particularly over the winter. A really nice queen I would keep in a nuke over the winter, so that in the springtime she's not stressed having to head up a really big brood box, and then I can use her eggs for queen rearing in the following season. Really useful. You can specifically set up nuke boxes and use them for drawing out brood frames for foundation. It can be quite large. You can make sure there's always young bees in there, and you can keep taking frames out and putting foundation in. Very useful. You can use the contents of a nuke box to augment specific colonies, or colonies which are going to put specific crops, like rape or heather. Rape is very early on in the year. Colonies haven't really built up strongly, except this year where they went off like a train. So you can actually unite nukes to them to build them up, or to put the brood in there. Or later on in the season, you can make sure colonies stay nice and big and strong for the heather. They're useful for converting into observation hives. If you're doing education or training or events, then a nuke very easily and without much stress can be moved into an observation hive, right? And one of the big areas which we as beekeepers should be doing is trying to keep 1 or 2 nukes over the winter with queens, just in case our queens fail in the springtime. I've had a few queens this year which have become drone layers early on. Unfortunately, I've had some nukes in order to replace the queens very quickly, and was able to take advantage of this tremendous flow we've just had. So that was my list. If anybody's got any addition to that, then just pop it onto the chat and we'll pick it up later on. But when you're doing a general husbandry, there are lots in that list there you can have a discussion with the assessors about when they ask you how are we going to use a nuke? What's the benefits of them? So we talked about nukes, right? Sections 1.4 and 3.9 of the syllabus say prepare a nucleus colony, swarm control, sale, increase, or queen mating. Now, you've got to ask yourself the question now, what is the difference between each of those? Because there must be a difference, otherwise I wouldn't have split them out like that. So let's have a look at that. Let's just analyze that for a little while. So if we look at the type we're looking at, in this case swarm control, how many frames of bees or would we expect to see in the nuke? How many bees in total? Is it a queen or a queen cell, or can it be either? And then general comments. So in swarm control, all we're doing is removing a queen from a swarming colony. So we only need a couple of frames in a nuke box, a couple of frames in a dummy board, and we only need enough bees to look after the queen. And it only takes a few hundred nurse bees to really look after a queen well. You're not wanting to use this nuke for building up or increase or for selling. All you're wanting to do is to use it to look after the queen as an insurance policy to see if the original swarming colony requeens properly, right? Key aspect of that is you've got to make sure you don't transfer queen cells to it. You would hope that the queen and the bees would tear them down because it's so small, but better not to do that in the first place. So that's a swarm control, very small colony, nuke box, few hundred bees, nurse bees, and the queen. What about if you're selling? And I put in brackets there today, because somebody may have contacted you and say yesterday and said, I'm desperate for bees. Have you got a nuke for sale? Can I come tomorrow evening and collect it? Right? So it's a very quick turnaround. And therefore, you're looking at 5 frames in a nuke box, bees, at least 4 full seams of bees, if not 5, a queen, and you've obviously got to have a method for producing that nuke very quickly, because it's kind of less than 24-hour turnaround. Right. What about if you're selling a nuke and you're planning it and you're going to put them up for sale the end of next week or the week after? Then that's a different scenario, isn't it? But it still requires the same number of frames, same number of bees, a queen, but you can use different manipulations to produce that, so you can take more time over it. And I'll talk a little about that. In a general husbandry assessment, you're more likely to get the former, right? You're selling a nuke, you've got to put a nuke together, you're selling it, and somebody's coming this evening to collect it. So you're forced in the assessment to do the quick method. But it's as well that you're aware that there are others. We've got increase. You want to go from 2 colonies to 3 or to 4 or from 10 to 15, whatever it is. You want to increase the number of colonies that you have, honey producing colonies, I'll call them. The number of frames you set up varies. And as the comment says, it depends how urgently you want the increase. If you want to increase, like for this season, then the nukes you build will be quite large because you want them to build up quickly. If you're thinking about next season, then you can start off small and just let them build up to nice big strong sizes for the end of this year to overwinter as a nuke. So the increase, there's lots of decisions there you can do. Similarly, the number of seams of bees you have, how many bees are in them, and also whether or not you have a mated queen or you're using a queen cell. So the increase, there's a lot more decisions and options you've got depending upon what your plans are. And then the final one is a queen mating. You've got a couple of frames as a minimum. You only need a few hundred nurse bees, and you've got a queen cell, which hopefully is going to emerge in the next 24 hours. And you could do that either using a full-size nuke. By full size, I mean that would take a national brood frame or whatever your brood box is, or you can use a mini mating nuke like an apidae. It's about queen mating, right? The interesting thing here to think about is that the queen cell is about to emerge. You only need a few hundred bees because the queen cell is capped, so you're not looking for bees to feed any larvae. You've got no requirement for royal jelly. The cell is going to emerge in 24 hours, so that what's in the cell, the imago, is virtually fully formed. And it doesn't need any tending other than making sure that the temperature is kept at 34.5 degrees. So that the number of bees you need are all about thermal regulation to get the queen cell to emerge properly, and then sufficient bees there to look after the virgin queen while she develops a bit further and goes on a mating flight. So there are differences when the syllabus asks swarm control, sale, increase of queen mating. There are differences in the kind of nuke that you produce, and it's worthwhile knowing why there are differences like that. Yeah. So how is it done? And this is where the rubber hits the road, because you know the theory, but you've got to be able to do this in practice at the request of the assessors in the assessment. So let's talk about swarm control first. We have a colony here. We have a brood box, queen excluder. I've only shown one super, and we find queen cells. So we find queen cells, the colony is going to swarm, we've got to control it. We find the queen, and we put her and the frame she's on with the bees into a nuke box. So we put her somewhere safe. Right? So the queen's there with some brood. We put in another frame with stores and pollen, so they've got something to feed on, foundation, and a dummy board. Right? And that's the nuke to look after the queen. You make sure there's no queen cells, so that we get rid of the swarming urge. And if you want, you can shake in a frame of young bees by taking a frame of out of the brood box, giving a gentle shake over the top of the brood box to get rid of the old flying bees or the foragers, and then shaking the younger bees into this just to augment it. It depends how many bees were on the frames you put in originally. Right? Move that nuke more than 3 feet away from the original site, probably turn it in a different direction, and the flying bees will leave it and go back to the original colony. So you're left with a nuke box with sufficient bees of young bees that will look after that queen, and they've got stores and pollen. So that should be okay, right? Depending upon if there's a flaw or not, because as these bees develop, there's certainly no flying bees there, you may need to feed, so you may want to put a frame feeder in there, if you have one, something like that. So you've got rid of the queen, so you've separated the queen from the brood and the flying bees. So that's one of the 3 elements gone. So this box here, the original box, you can reduce to 1 or 2 queen cells, replace the frames with foundation that you took out so you have a full complement, and then over the coming days manage the queen cells so you're only left with 1 in this. And that's the process. In the assessment, you must be able to do this part of the process, finding the queen, creating the nuke to this part, and then have a sensible discussion with the assessors as to how you look after that nuke box going into the future days and weeks, and on the original colony, how you manage the queen cells. Yeah? And that would be the task done if you were asked to do that. So that's swarm control, pretty straightforward. That's my preferred method in my own apiary. Just keep taking the queen out, because a big benefit is you don't split the original colony too much, so you've still got your honey production force of foragers there. Right, you're asked to produce a nuke for sale. So that begs the question, what does a good nuke look like? Excuse me. And years ago, there used to be a code of practice which the beekeepers associations tried to get providers to sign up to define what a good nuke looks like. I think it's fallen by the wayside, but I'm going to go back to what that said. Right? It's a 5-frame nuke. That's the standard. So you have 5 frames of bees. You have a full nuke box of bees. Right? In that, there are 2, possibly 3 frames of brood, but more likely 2, and that's brood at all stages. Right, 1 or 2 frames of stores of honey and pollen, 1 of stores, 1 of pollen, 1 frame of foundation to make up the total. So depending on how many frames of brood you're making up with frames of stores and pollen, but it's a full nuke box of bees. So when you take the lid off it, you should see plentiful supply of bees. You shouldn't be searching around to see how many seams there are. 1 laying queen, marked but not necessarily clipped. Some people will clip some suppliers will clip if they're asked, but at additional charge. Not everybody likes the queens clipped, but it should certainly be marked. And the other thing is that the brood here, these frames of brood, should be from the queen that is in the nuke, so that any purchaser can look at the brood pattern, the laying pattern on those frames, and judge whether or not the queen that's in the box is a good queen. Seems sensible, doesn't it? It shouldn't be a box of bees chucked together with a couple of frames of brood in, and then a queen plonked in 20 minutes before the customer arrives to collect it. Right? So the brood should be from the queen that's in the nuke. And the frames should all be of a reasonable condition. They should be pretty clean. The foundation's obviously new, but the brood frame shouldn't be filthy black, and neither should the stores or pollen. So that there should be evidence there that it's been looked after. So that's what good looks like, and therefore, if you're selling a nuke, that's ideally what you're aiming to provide. So how do you go about creating a nuke for sale where somebody is collecting it this evening, right? So it's a 5-frame nuke. So you find the queen and keep her safe, right? You then put together frame of stores, frame mainly of pollen, 2 frames of capped and emerging brood with bees, a frame of foundation, right? Shake the bees in from 2 of the frames. Young bees, gently shake the frames to dislodge all the bees, and then introduce the queen back into the nuke. You can probably do that from a colony which is identified within 10 minutes. The queen is from that colony, so you don't have to worry about delaying the introduction. You've just kept her safe. You're putting her back in there. Right? So from an assessment point of view, as long as you have the equipment ready, you can do that in 10 minutes. And it's fairly straightforward. But you need to practice so that you're not worrying about, is it how many frames of stores and how many of this and how many of the other. It just flows from you. It's fluent. Right? If it's staying in the same apiary, stuff the entrance with grass to keep the bees there, keep the bees inside, because if they're off-lying bees and you want to keep them, the person who's buying it wants to have them. They don't want to see it depleted, but obviously that's something that they're coming today, in which case, if you've blocked the entrance, then you're going to have to make sure that nuke box is in a nice sheltered spot, not in direct sunlight, so the bees can still thermoregulate, right? If you move it to a different site to be collected there, move it 3 miles away, you don't need to worry. You can keep it open until the person arrives that evening. Yeah. So that's pretty straightforward, isn't it? What about, so before I move on to the next one, so what to help you visualize it, this is a new box. You've got a couple of frames of brood, all stages, right? Either side of that, you've got stores and pollen, and you've got foundation, right? And that would generally fill a brood box or one of these Corex travel boxes. And the queen's in there. Okay. Now, if you're creating a nuke and somebody's going to collect it next week, or you're planning to sell it next week or the week after, then you can use it. You could use the same process and just have it there ready. Yeah? However, let me just explain to you a slightly different process, which works very well and takes risk out of it. Right? You have your box you're going to create your nuke from. Right? Remove 2 frames from it of emerging and cap brood and shake the bees off. You don't want any bees on them. Right? And replace foundation at the edges. Right? So we've now got the similar configuration. brood box, less 2 frames of brood, but replaced with foundation, queen excluder super, right? Then put a queen excluder on there and an empty brood box. And into that brood box, put the brood you've removed, a frame of stores and pollen either side, and foundation. So in other words, you're building up the nuke you're wanting to sell or you're wanting to create in this spare brood box above the brood box below. And you put the crown board on and you put the roof on, and then you leave that for about 24 hours. And I say 12 hours or so, but it could be 24, right? What will happen is the nurse bees from the main box will move up through the queen excluder and the super into the nuke you've created in the empty brood box. And they'll move up in sufficient numbers to look after and take care of the brood that's up there, right? The foragers and the older bees won't move up, it'll just be the nurse bees, right? So after 12, 24 hours or so, you can remove that top brood box and put those frames in a nuke box. So you've actually taken the nuke that you created in the big brood box and now transfer that into the nuke box, which you're going to sell. Put the queen in so that she gets used to that. There's fewer bees there, but they're all nurse bees. The brood that's in there over the course of the next few days before it's collected will emerge, become nurse bees. Some of the nurse bees will become foragers, and the queen will continue to lay. Right? There'll be no flying bees, so you can leave the nuke in the same apiary site. You don't have to worry about blocking the entrance. Right? However, if there are no flying bees or no foragers, so you may well have to provide some syrup to feed the bees until they build up their own foragers force. Now, that is a really neat and simple way of creating a nuke box when you've got time to do it. And I've done that several times when I've been creating nukes to sell, or I want to split off nukes and even put queen cells in them. It's a really neat and easy way of doing it, and takes the risk out of when you're just shaking bees into a nuke box. You're thinking, have I got enough bees in there, or the nurse bees, or the foragers, or will they fly off? It just gets rid of that risk. What about increase? So we talked about swarm control. We talked about sale, whether or not the sale is being collected tonight or in the future. And now what about increase? Right. Okay. You can create a nuke using any of the things I've just talked about. Right. Just split out 5 frames as I've done, or put the empty brood box above a hive. You can use any of those, right? And the frames of brood dictate the size of the nuke you're going to create, and that will then in turn dictate how quickly it will grow. So if you want to increase very quickly, like now to get honey for this season, then you need to create a big nuke, and you also need to feed it so it builds up quickly. If you're more concerned about creating nukes which you want to overwinter, then I would just start small and let it develop and monitor it. And then if I needed to, augment it later on in the season with bees, rather than deplete my honey production force now in creating nukes, which in theory, potentially, could get too big for the nuke for the winter, and you end up splitting the nukes. I hope that makes sense. So you've got to decide when you want the increase to do, and that will then dictate how big you want them to be, right? So you create the nuke, you introduce your queen, can be newly mated queen or bought. You need to be able to discuss how you would do that introduction so it's done safely with the assessor. So you need to talk about the cage it's in, or the attendants in the cage or not. How long do you leave it to get the delay? And then how long do you leave it to let the bees eat through any fondant to let the queen out? and then how long do you leave it alone to let it get established. And also it could be a swarm cell. You may have a very nice colony there with a swarm cell, and you decide to make increase by harvesting one of those swarm cells to create a queen and a nuke. So on this increase, there are lots of options for you as a beekeeper because you're doing it for yourself. But each of those options, the assessors in the general husbandry may want to have a sensible discussion with you about it. Right? Right. So in essence, it could just be a split of a strong colony, which is about to swarm, and you harvest a swarm cell to put in there. So increases all, lots of options there. Let me talk about queen mating. This is the last one. Right? You've got to decide in the queen mating, if you're asked to put a nuke together for queen mating, for your queen mating, do you use full-size brood frames in a nuke of that size, or do you use mini nukes like Apideas? And I would advise you to keep it simple. Don't get yourself confused unless you're very proficient at queen rearing and queen mating, and you're very good at handling mini nukes and setting them. That's fine. If you're not, if you're in doubt, just stick with full-size nukes, because you may well, at the assessment, be asked to create one, and you don't want to dig yourself holes. Okay. If it's full-size nuke, just create a nuke as if you're doing swarm control. You don't need many bees. Introduce a queen cell protected with foil. You can see a photo here of 4 of my queen cells, and I've put aluminium foil around them to protect the sides while I've introduced them into nukes, so the queen can emerge from this end. And ideally, you want these to be of an age where the queen is going to emerge in the next 24 hours. So it's kind of like day 15 of the cycle. If you're going to use a mini nuke, then you've got to be prepared to have the mini nuke with a container of fondant in it, turn it upside down, harvest the bees in a cup to shake in the bottom, close it all up and have it prepared as if you're going to put the queen cell in and then put it into a cool, dark place and keep it locked up for about 48 hours. If that's what you decide to do, make sure you're proficient at it and go and do it. Don't try to do something different. Just put in your mind, keep it simple. Okay. So there were the tasks. The one last area where, excuse me, there may well be a discussion about, and that's preparing for the winter. Section 3.14, 314 of the syllabus. So what does that mean? Right? If you're preparing nukes for the winter, you've got to be thinking of a minimum of a 5-frame nuke box. Bees have got to be sufficient in quantity, so they have sufficient numbers to thermoregulate over the cold winter months. So small nukes won't survive. Right? So in August time frame, you want to have a strong colony, strong nuke colony that is. So you're looking at 5 full seams of bees, so a nuke box which is full. And if you don't have that, then you should be uniting weak and healthy nukes to make strong ones. It's better to go into the winter with one really strong, healthy nuke than 3 or 4 very weak ones which won't survive. Yeah. So you want a strong nuke, build it up, make it 5 seams of bees. You've got to do varroa control on it, whatever your varroa control is. Be able to monitor, assess how much varroa is in there. Alcohol wash is probably the best form at that stage of the year. And feed to build up the winter stores. Yes, it's a half size, but of the 5 frames in a nuke box over the winter, then you need 4 of them full of stores, because that will then the bees will eat that. Right. And then in the springtime, you've got to make sure they don't starve, because they will be building up pretty quickly a good healthy nuke box, and they will eat their stores faster than the bees in a full brood box. So you've got to take special vigilance in springtime about hefting and making sure they don't starve, and monitoring the space, because they seem to go from very small and you feed them, and then within the space of about 4 weeks they're almost bursting out of the nukes. So you've either got to put them in a full brood box or split them down again to keep them nuke size. Right, so let's have a recap of what we've just talked about then. Right, the syllabus is very focused. There's a requirement to have a 1 queen-right nucleus colony. You may be asked to prepare a nucleus colony. That's physically prepare one as a manipulation, and you'll be told whether that's swarm control, sale, increase, or queen mating. As I said, listen to what's said, repeat back, make sure you have agreement that both parties understand. Right? You may be asked about procedures to prepare the nucleus. In other words, you think of a 5 frame, a couple of brood, you've got to have stores, you've got to have foundation. Discuss the uses of a colony. There's a big long list, wasn't there? Big long list. And then how colonies are prepared for the winter and the timing of that. So in some ways, well, in absolute ways, you've got to prepare them the same way as you would a normal colony, except be conscious of the fact that because it's a small box, it can run out of food quicker and it can run out of space quicker. Yeah. So my advice is listen carefully to what is said by the assessors. Keep it simple. Whatever you do, keep it simple. Yeah. Practice, practice, practice. And then that will just shine through when you're asked to do it on the day of the assessment, because it'll just be muscle memory going through its reflex action almost, and it'll just shine through. Okay. Happy to take questions now. I'll stop the share.
Thanks, Dave. That was really excellent. We've got several comments. For increase, would you ever use 3-day eggs to let them develop a queen cell?
Well, you can do. If you're doing queen rearing, which is what you're implying is that somebody's selecting the eggs to do that. Sorry, I'm just going to get rid of something on the screen here. It's annoying me. That's better. Let me just move this around. Sorry, I'm being techie now. So what that is implying to me is that you're doing queen rearing and you've selected the eggs that you want to use on your increase, and that's perfectly okay. Yeah. But I wouldn't use eggs. I would just make sure that the young larvae in there, so that the bees would immediately latch onto that and start producing the queen cells. Now, the difficulty you have in that situation is the nuke box is quite small, and if you want to raise queen cells from larvae, very young larvae, or eggs, you need to have lots and lots of very young bees where the hypopharyngeal glands are very plump to produce the royal jelly needed to develop those. So that's a risk in a nuke box. You may not have sufficient young bees to provide sufficient royal jelly to give you really good quality queens. You're much better off producing the queen cells in a cell raiser if you're queen mating, or using swarm cells from hives that you want to use those genetics from, and putting them in the nuke so other colonies have done the work of raising the queen cells. Yeah, you get rid of a lot of risk and you probably improve the quality of the queen.
Thank you. And Julie's asked, do you need to cage the queen for sale?
During the assessment, when you're making up the nuke, you'll be expected to find the queen and keep her safe. And that implies caging her or putting the frame she's on somewhere safe while you're doing the manipulation. Yeah, because if that is the queen that you're selling and it's her bees that you're using to make up the nuke, there's no need to cage her as in queen introduction. Have I got the difference right? One is caging the queen to protect her when you're doing the manipulation. The other one is introducing a foreign queen into the nuke that you're going to sell, in which case you've got to go through an introduction process.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Somebody's asked, when preparing a nuke for sale, what do you do with the remaining colony? And I think if we look at maybe for the purpose of the assessment, and then perhaps after, if you were actually planning on selling it.
Okay. If at the assessment you will be, let's say you're asked to produce a nuke for sale, and you'll be asked to do it from a particular one of your colonies, for the assessors will have looked at your records. So they'll say, hive number 21, users bees, I want you to produce a nuke for sale, collecting it tonight. Yeah. Once you have done that and you have said you finished, the assessors will then ask you to put the colony back together, so it is left in the same way that it was found. Unless, because it's your bees and your apiary, you turn around and say, no, I was going to do that anyway, I'll sort that out later. Yeah, that's perfectly okay. The assessors will say, fine, but just make sure everything was okay. If you're doing it for real, then it depends what's left. You may just want to, you may have a queen rearing program going on in the background, so you use that as a mating nuke. What's left as a mating colony, and you put a queen cell in it. You may unite what's left with another colony to increase your honey production force of another colony. You may split it down and to make another nuke. There are a lot. When you ask the question of beekeeping, the answer always starts, it depends. Because there are so many options and depending upon what you want to achieve. Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Dave. Are wooden or poly nukes better for overwintering?
Well, I dislike poly hives. That's a personal view. Two reasons. One is the difficulty of cleaning, and two is from an environmental point of view. How do you get rid of them? But I must admit, I have poly nukes, and they are much better for me at overwintering. They're 6-frame nukes as opposed to my wooden 5-frame nukes, and the colonies overwinter much better in the poly than in the wooden ones. So for that reason, to achieve what I want to achieve, I have poly nukes.
Excellent, thank you. What indicators show that a queen is 24 hours from emerging?
15 days from when the egg was laid.
So do you write the dates on the tops of your frames of when you've first seen eggs in a frame?
Well, if I'm queen rearing, then I have it timed down to the day. Right?
Yeah.
If you're not sure, if you've got a swarm cell, then you've got to take a chance. It depends on when your last inspection was, if you saw an open cell, a closed cell. An indicator is when they're getting close to within the last 3 days, is when that black line starts to appear around the bottom of the queen cell, where the queen inside is starting to nibble. Yeah. And if you're not sure, then be overcautious and move the cell kind of like 2 days before or even 3 days before. It won't make that huge difference. Yeah. Because the pupa, the imago inside it will still be pretty well formed. You just got to make sure that when you move the queen cell into the nuke for mating, that there are sufficient bees in the nuke to be able to thermoregulate properly to carry on looking after the queen inside that cell.
Thank you. I've got a question that I've thought of that might help people taking the assessment.
Yeah.
Because you have to have 3 colonies that have to meet certain requirements and a nuke, how do you keep the nuke a nuke? Can you give people some hints on that?
Right. I think the starting point is getting to the date of your general husbandry. Right? And once you agree the date for the general husbandry with the assessor, the lead assessor, then hopefully you've got probably 4 or 5 weeks, maybe it's more. So I would work backwards from that in terms of creating a nuke. So I may have a plan where I have maybe 5 full colonies. And then when I know the date for the assessment, then I would say colony XYZ is probably the smallest or the weakest. I'm going to make that into a nuke for my assessment. Yeah. If you already have a nuke, then you can try to manage the size of it by continually taking out frames of brood and frames of stores and putting foundation in and bleeding off the flying bees by keep moving it to a different spot. Yeah.
Yeah. Lovely, thank you.
So I think if you have the option, like on your queen rearing, for your general husbandry, work backwards from the date of the assessment and just use bee biology and the timing to get to where you want to be.
Yeah, thank you. Maggie's put something in. For queen rearing, she's been told that moving an uncapped jelly full cell will ensure that the cell is occupied. Is this correct?
You just repeat that, please, because my cup of tea was just arriving.
She's been told that an uncapped jelly full cell will ensure the cell is occupied. So I assume she's meaning a queen cell really full of royal jelly is actually going to have a larvae in it.
Oh, I'm not sure, because what will tell you if it's occupied and the right age is when you look in a queen cell and you can see a patch of royal jelly in the bottom, but nothing else. That tells me that because the royal jelly is only put there when the egg is hatched. So the royal jelly tells me that the egg is hatched. And because I can't see the larvae, it means the larvae is only 24 hours old. Yeah. Now, the larvae increases in size at a fantastic rate. So by day 3, it's obvious it's there. Yeah, you can see it. And more royal jelly is going in. So if Maggie means that if you're looking at a queen cell and you can see it, queen cell has got an egg in it very easily, but then it goes quickly from that into, you just see the white bed of royal jelly. That is a good larvae of the right age to do queen rearing from. Yeah, so if you see a cell like that, then if you have a cell raiser, pop it in that. I think that's what she means.
I think so. She's not come back typing anything, I don't think so.
Yeah, that is what I mean.
Okay.
Rather than waiting until it is capped, transferring it prior to capping to a cell raising nuke.
Wow. Oh, now that's a different question.
Ah,
That's a different question. You're much better off if you have the cell, the queen cell, capped moving into a nuke, unless the nuke is extremely strong and full of young bees, right? Unless you've specifically created it like that, you're much better off leaving that queen cell, the larvae, to be fed and nurtured in a full colony cell raiser, where it will get plenty royal jelly, and then only transferring it to the nuke when it's capped.
Okay.
because then the responsibility for feeding is in the full colony, as opposed to in a much smaller nuke.
Okay. Thank you.
Right, there we go. We are very nearly out of time. Thank you so much, Dave. That was really interesting and useful, I'm sure, very much so, for everyone planning on starting with nukes if they haven't, or for those taking their general husbandry. So thank you so much for that. That was really brilliant.
That's okay, my pleasure. Well, I think it's recorded. The link or something will be there.
Yeah.
For people who weren't able to make it, but everybody go away, enjoy your beekeeping. Don't forget, practice, practice, practice. I'm going to drop off now, okay?
Right, thank you very much. Very good
Thank you.
advice there. Cheers.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave.
Bye.
Thank you.